All right. Let's see. So it being 6:01, I'm kicking off this July 29 meeting of the Master Plan Update Committee. We'll start with a roll call. Let's see. Babbitt,
President.
Drown,
Present.
Lamb,
Present.
Davis,
Present.
Defensor,
Present.
Dustumian,
I think she's still
Nikki.
parking.
Yeah,
Present. I'm sorry. Present.
great. And Danielson.
Present.
Did I miss anybody? No, and Zygmunt is present.
Nobody that is here. We've
Great.
got everybody that's on.
Great. All right, so we do have a quorum, and before we begin, I think I need to go over some of the Zoom instructions. So this meeting will be conducted over Zoom. The committee members will be remote, and their remote attendance counts as quorum. The agenda is available on the town website. The members will be on video and audio. Public participants are joining as an attendee, so they'll be muted with no video. If at any time there's a public testimony portion on the agenda, then we will enable folks to raise their hand and speak, and you can do that by pressing *9. All votes will be done by roll call, and we'll announce ourselves as well for the record when we're making those votes. Super. So the first item on the agenda is the review and acceptance of the June 18, 2025 minutes. Does anybody have any changes for those? Doesn't look like it. Do I have a motion?
I'll move to accept the minutes.
Second.
Okay. Do I have a second?
Babbitt, second.
All right, no further discussion. Okay, we'll do a roll call vote. Babbitt?
Yes.
Drown? Oh, sorry, Stephen, you're muted.
Sorry. Yes.
Defensor?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Davis? Melissa, are you with us? It looks like she might be frozen.
Oh, it looks like she's frozen. All right, I'll keep an eye out to see if she logs back in.
Okay, and Dustumian?
Yes.
Okay. Is that enough for quorum, Stephanie?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, great. All right, and Zygmunt, aye, and Stephanie?
Aye.
Aye, great, so that passes. And now on to the June 24 public engagement session debrief and discussion. So with that, I'll pass it over to, I don't know, Wayne, Stephanie, Jeff, whoever wants to go.
It'll be Jeff.
Jeff, go for it, Jeff.
Okay, great. Hi, everybody. Thanks for having this meeting and being available. I know it was a little tricky in the summer. Yeah, what I was going to do is walk through the document, which hopefully you've seen and was shared with you. It's a summary of the community meeting that was held on June 24th. We felt like we didn't have like the largest turnout, ever, but we had really good feedback. And when the people who were in the room and participating, were engaged, and it felt good. And the summary that we've produced is really helpful for us. It kind of helps provide another kind of foundational piece for us to use as we move, into this last kind of phase of especially creating goals and objectives and things like that to shape the updated master plan. So I think what I'll do is I'll share my screen, and then I think if anybody has any questions or comments, I think just kind of jump in and interrupt me, stop me for a minute. But I think the goal is for you all to flag.
Jeff, can I stop you for just 1 minute?
Yeah.
Wayne, did we send that out to everybody?
Yes.
The summary? Okay. Just making sure. Sorry.
That's okay. And it's long. It's kind of got, a summary of the meeting. It's got sort of transcription of the notes, It's got a copy of the PowerPoint presentation and then some photos of the event. And then what we will include is actual, photos of the handwritten large format print boards. They just got too large in terms of file size to transmit as part of this. So as I was saying, I think interrupt me. I think what we're looking for from the committee is if something is glaringly wrong or doesn't seem right, or if there's something that just was missed, that's kind of our target for tonight. And then after that, we should talk about the schedule moving forward, which I think was also transmitted out to the committee, and then just kind of looking to confirm the next meeting. So I think with that, jump right in. I am going to keep, if everyone can see it okay, I'm going to keep this version up. It's just working in the Word file, so I can make some notes as we go. But everyone knows we had the meeting on June 24th. It was at Frothingham Hall. It provided an overview of the project and updates, so that was via the presentation. And then we really kind of broke into groups and had some discussions on these 5 groups. So infrastructure and sewer expansion, housing, economic development and land use, transportation access, open space, climate and resiliency, and cultural engagement and finances. And so that was kind of our topical areas, and those are important because they kind of weave through the draft plan. Hold on one sec here, I lost my screen. I'm going to keep going. And after the presentation, we made an announcement that people could submit comments until July 14th online. And I did see that that was available on the website, but I did have a question for Stephanie or Wayne, whether anyone actually utilized that opportunity. So we can follow up on that, but that is a question. We wanted to incorporate any written comments that might have been received.
We got one and possibly 2 very minor comments that we can forward to.
Okay, that'd be great because we can incorporate them. Our objectives were really to raise awareness about the project and then have the facilitated group discussions, which really got us some valuable information. And through the document, we have some good photos of people being engaged. We started off with a presentation. If you haven't seen it, the recording is available. And so usually what we do is within the master plan document itself is we will insert, a link that will last as long as the web page is alive, that will get people to watch the meeting, and then we'll link to this summary as well within the plan. The way we kind of break this out is start to identify the themes that we're seeing, and a lot of this gets joined with the stakeholder interviews that we've done to get input from a variety of town officials and business community members and those groups. Then we have this community meeting input, and we also have the prior plans, which also sets forth a variety of goals and objectives across topics. And so our process now is to kind of merge these together under these groups and start to identify things that are clearly goals and the things that are objectives and actions. And that's kind of the process that we'll be going through between now and the committee's next meeting when we kind of publish the next draft. But under housing, the challenges and concerns, there was a lot of comments about the high cost of entry level housing and limited ability for seniors to downsize. And so those are entry level, and then kind of like that housing chain. Youth and families struggle to find suitable and affordable housing, rising rents, and lack of smaller units. Kind of a lack of certain types of housing, so one level accessible homes. So we talked, at the past meeting about how the town can look towards, supporting its aging community, and that's one way, is a certain type of housing type. Long-time residents hold onto their homes longer, and that is definitely a pattern that we are seeing, in other towns that we're working in, and that eliminates that changeover in the housing types And then the need for kind of senior housing and ADU options are at least identified through this meeting are insufficient. And then the logistics of downsizing can be a barrier. And so, our goal through all of these is to then identify things that are strategies, and as we work through the language, whether they become a goal or objective. But a couple options are to promote smaller lots. So really looking at the minimum lot size under the zoning. Tiny homes is sort of it's a little bit of an enigma in Massachusetts. The Massachusetts building code is not quite there yet, but a lot of people kind of identify that as a potential area to explore, especially if the building code changes. And then kind of these smaller units. Expanding the opportunities for affordable senior housing was definitely identified. Create housing diversity to retain seniors and attract young families. And so again, that's kind of those two cohorts. That was definitely the theme of the night in terms of this, at least this group. Encouraging accessory dwelling units. And so we'll be looking quickly at your zoning and just continue to see if there's any additional tweaks or amendments that might want to be pursued by the town in the future to just continue to make that an easier option. Encouraging mixed-use development. We had a lot of discussions about the industrial park throughout the night, and then the ECAT area were identified here for housing, looking at building partnerships with developers, and then all of this is kind of balanced with maintaining the town character. Is an essential balance with all this. And then repurposing the underused facilities, so the center school and the council on aging building came up. And then in terms of economic development and land use, some of the comments were about Main Street, lacking businesses in certain areas. Washington Street remains underutilized, and that's something that we see a lot coming from the previous planning efforts, that there have been efforts to support that corridor, but really it becomes a focus area over the next 10 years to just continue to drill down and make sure that the town is doing everything we can to support development there. I did flag this. Existing commercial areas may not appeal to modern investment. I did give myself a note to clarify what that actually meant. Part of it, I think, is about the market demand for certain types of businesses and uses. There needs to be the market demand in order to bring in new businesses. So we're going to look into that. The risk of over-regulation could be deterring growth, and I think that's a little bit of a perception issue. I know the town is going through the study on the permitting process with another consultant, Wayne Fiden, who I know from Northampton. We would like to get an update on that project to see if as we wrap up, if there's any preliminary findings that we can incorporate in terms of actions, we would like to do that, because I think there's definitely some room for some improvements there. And then disconnect between land use planning and economic growth drivers, and we're sort of looking at what that actually means, but it kind of came up as something that people were identifying. Then some proposed strategies, and it's difficult for the town to always do this, but sort of looking to attract anchor tenants in certain areas, and so you could always get a bigger company to come in, or really encourage the mix of business types is something that we're going to look at in terms of goals. And explore the redevelopment of aging retail spaces. So the Shaw's Plaza was mentioned as one example, and those are always on the table for communities, but just making sure that that there's a process, and the zoning would allow sort of certain conversions over time. Those are important things to have on this 10-year look. And then again, kind of the industrial park. I remember, like, in my group specifically, there was this conversation about not only a hotel, but also more housing within the industrial park or certain areas, and really just taking a closer look at the industrial park, I think, is definitely something that we see will be a top goal for the town, to maximize the amount of industrial space that's in there, but also if there are other opportunities along roadways for changing it over time. And then balancing restrictions with incentives to attract investment. So that's always a give and take, where businesses and developers want ultimate freedom to move forward while you want to have some design standards and some regulations in place, and really just looking at the priority areas for commercial growth. And we have a activity areas map that I think really gels with what the community has been seeing in terms of your real active areas. And then really kind of highlight the proximity to Stonehill College. That came up a couple times, and I think it is an opportunity for the town to continue to work on that relationship and understand the connection and try to draw some of those students or their parents kind of into town any chance that you get. Infrastructure and sewer. So we talked about this a lot in terms of different elements, but there was across the board when the groups were reporting out, there was a general lack of knowledge about the sewer expansion plans and the details of that. Some people were, identified, and this came up in our stakeholder interviews about the cost burden attached to, connecting to the sewer and paying for that over time. It is just something to be cognizant of, that it will cost property owners money over time, but kind of understanding the funding models, uncertainty about who will fund sewer expansion. So we had some questions about expanding it into the industrial park, and that was sort of the number one question was, well, how does that work? Who would pay for it? And so, as the town looks at that, sort of, we would see it, creating an educational campaign, and doing outreach and educating property owners about what it means. And then incomplete infrastructure was noted. I had a typo. So Foundry Street, not fully extended here. So I'm going to correct that. Then some proposed strategies, which is really.
So Jeff, can I just stop you for a second?
Yep.
Sorry, my mind wandered briefly. So what is the discontent with flat rate funding models? What is that? Did you just explain that?
I don't know. To be honest, I would want to clarify what that, if we can feel around for what people were concerned with. It had to do with the sewer infrastructure costs, but I don't know. That didn't come out of my group, but I can clarify that.
Okay, okay, when you said sewer, I think I may have an idea what that was about.
Okay. I'll work on clarifying that for this sort of the final draft. Same vein, strategies, just really clear cost funding strategy as the town talks about continuing sewer efforts. I think it's just kind of going to be an educational effort. It's not that the town didn't do that before, but I think as new people are paying attention, I think it goes hand in hand with discussion of expanding it. And transparency. So the link sewer betterments to property taxes rather than flat fees. So it's definitely, this starts to get
Right.
About what people were talking about. And then again with the Foundry Street, that didn't get picked up by spell check, obviously. And then really looking at the return on investment and understanding what is the ultimate goal, and how will it benefit the town in the long run. And then prioritizing critical infrastructure improvements that enable development. And so that came clear through the pace discussions as well. That discussion, although difficult for the town, was really pretty impactful in terms of getting a larger group of people aware that good development could actually bring new tax revenue, and it helps support providing the services that everyone wants in town. So that's actually good that it's coming through here. It was coming through in the PACE discussions as well.
Yeah, I just have one other comment before you move on.
Mm-hmm.
What you have there says extend Foundry Street eastward to Avalon and beyond. So
Yes.
we want to look at that because Avalon is west, on the west end of Foundry Street. And I know there were a lot of folks there from the Furnace Village district area.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like maybe that wasn't what they meant. It was coming from them. I don't know if Wayne had any insights or any of the other members were at the table, or
It may have meant the other direction. I mean, right
Yeah.
now it goes from Mansfield to Avalon, and then the idea is to carry.
okay, so okay.
That's my guess.
Yep.
Yep, that's very helpful. These are the small
But
things.
I just think it's an important, it may
Yes.
seem minor, but it's an important distinction.
Absolutely. Transportation, we when we did the presentation and kind of leading up to it, we did want to make the point to people to understand that public transit, is it's not going to be just something where the community can just bring in a new public transit line and have all the problems solved. There are services that are available, but it's underutilized. So there was a lot of discussion about enhancing. I think it comes up in the strategies. Speeding and unsafe driving on town roads is ubiquitous. It's a big concern in a lot of places, and so that makes a lot of sense. Limited walkability in commercial and residential areas was kind of just a general priority topic. And then congestion and a lack of multimodal options. So those are the challenges and concerns. And then the strategies are continuing, the town has done a lot. So continuing to improve sidewalks, especially in downtown and your schools, really looking at connections. And so for example, the Borderland Park came up, traffic calming measures. And I don't know, every town's DPW seems to have some different opinions on traffic calming measures, but just understanding the potential for speed bumps as one option. And then there was, I recall in my group in particular, there was a lot of discussion about safe routes to schools, just making sure that the town is fully engaged in that process. It provides a lot of infrastructure funding for areas around schools, promoting the rideshare options for commuters. And then really just kind of across the board continuing to invest in infrastructure and leveraging grants, and Easton's been really good at doing that. So just kind of continuing that. I had the person in the group who was like, let's bring the train through Easton, and I think it wasn't a joke, but it was, it's one of those things that may or may not ever happen. But rails to trails conversion or park and rides and other options that are similar, I think, go on this list for strategies. And then sort of ambitious, but I think it comes up a lot, is taking some of the roadways out from Mass DOT. It can be very challenging, and it actually can be very cost burdensome to towns, but I think in theory, it could give the town a little more control over certain roadways. But that came up as a strategy. And then open space and environmental resilience. So some of the challenges is really development pressure threatening the existing and remaining open space, lack of green integration in new developments. It's sort of this ever-present threat of increased storm activity, flooding, and then the flip side of all that is drought conditions, and then things like tree loss and habitat degradation. Some of the strategies really to try to essentially require that especially larger developments integrate or bring in some kind of open space component, whether it's a connection through the property or its own open space, and then really avoid developing residential open space. So I think this means some of the more outlying residential areas. I'm going to try to make a note about outlying residential areas, I think was the gist of that strategy. Prioritizing the protection of critical parcels. And so, the open space plan has some information, and then just understanding which of these parcels are really critical to the town, and just making sure that they are protected. Develop resilient infrastructure to handle extreme weather. Require developers to include renewable and green components. So things like whether it's solar fields or carport solars or solar panels or EV charging stations, there are some opportunities to have new developments bring those things in. Create more walking paths and athletic fields, and then solar canopies, and making, bringing, especially for new public buildings, bringing them up to this point where they're solar ready. I remember in the group that I had, there was some concern about retrofitting old buildings. It can be very expensive and challenging to do, but there's another opportunity for a town project that's going to be new construction to incorporate some of these technologies. And then culture, arts, and recreation. Limited full-time staffing for arts and culture was identified, here as a challenge or concern. The need for more public gathering spaces and inclusive programs, historical and cultural assets may be underutilized, and facilities like old schools are falling into disrepair. But some of the strategies to pursue, again, in the 10-year view is to try to bring that existing position to full-time and make an arts and culture coordinator. There's a lot of towns that have found a lot of success in that, to use arts and culture as a part of the economic development activities. And then activate spaces. So there was some really great examples, that Easton already has, and just continue to activate more spaces and bring more residents out and visitors. Promote cultural events, and then repurpose the aging facilities into rec or community centers. So, the town has this separate ongoing discussion about reusing some of the facilities. That is the other thing, Stephanie, I think as we move forward into this kind of final stage, knowing whether there's any feedback or input on that, the utilization project that you have underway, that would be helpful.
Yeah.
I did end up watching that meeting, the community meeting that you had a couple days after this.
Right.
But as you get any kind of preliminary findings from that consultant group, we'd like to incorporate them.
Mm-hmm.
And then the last couple are education. So enrollment decline, is a concern. It's a real concern across a lot of communities that declining enrollment has a lot of negative impacts. And so balancing that, identifying that and trying to find strategies. Families choosing to opt out, and then risk of losing arts and music programs because of the budget cuts. We asked some pretty pointed questions about things that people would like to preserve and things that you would pick if you had to go through this process of cutting certain things. And then the strategies is really to preserve art and music and core academic programs, using the former school buildings to serve for community needs. So again, that discussion of the center school came up here. Education to housing link by addressing the school age housing gap. So I think just making sure that you have enough new growth that you can bring in new families to find that future enrollment. And then similar thing, coordinate school planning with housing and service needs. Civic engagement and communication. So challenges are, lack of a town newspaper or consistent public information. And I think the town's been doing great. And I don't know if it's more of a recent effort, but we often hear that no matter how hard a community is trying, there's people who don't feel like they're engaged and can't find the information they want, and sort of residents unaware of ongoing planning processes. Public engagement limited to a few individuals, which is unfortunately pretty common. It's hard to get. There's tons of people who live in every town, and to get them engaged, it's a very difficult thing, and it takes a lot of effort. So some of the proposed strategies are to consider a town newsletter, whether it's print or digital, community email lists, and signage for meeting notices, and really looking at this inclusive outreach opportunities through other local organizations, things like churches and other groups that have a network of people. Those can often be really good at engaging new groups of people. Really just highlighting the importance of public input for planning success, and then transparency and two-way communication. Some of that came out of the PACE work. And then finances and services, budget constraints really threaten the core services. So that's definitely a concern that was identified. And then, the health insurance premiums are a heavy burden on the town. It's not just in Easton, it's happening in a lot of places. It's a little unfortunate that there's no actual solution other than what Easton has been grappling with. And then kind of the question about what to protect. So a lot of people said, protect public safety, education, senior services. So those all make a lot of sense. Those are typically high priorities. Really exploring regional partnerships, self-funded health insurance. It's definitely not in my area of expertise, but that came up through a couple people. And then just really looking at service delivery models for efficiency. And finally, just kind of these other ideas, things that we asked if we missed anything, people really still want more recreational opportunities and this kind of maker opportunities for all ages, and so really just finding more activities for all ages, and then really kind of looking at and finding the people in your town who have expertise and passion to become part of the town government process, and just really trying to find those people. So workshops for kids, engaging the talents that you have, finding them and really trying to get them involved, and then preserving, Easton's identity through thoughtful reuse and investment was just kind of an overarching strategy that was identified here. During the meeting, we used this interactive poll, so people who were in the room, that you had to use a smartphone, and it was a little awkward sometimes, so kind of to get people to do this, but we've been finding some success with this. And so the idea here was the group discussions were groups and kind of talking through and trying to reach some kind of consensus. And this interactive poll really allowed the individuals in the room to chime in on what they were feeling personally. And so infrastructure priorities, and we pitched it in a certain way. We know that looking at the industrial park is a great opportunity for the town, but that was supported by the participants as a really important strategy. And then using the surplus municipal properties, really maintaining and repairing the existing infrastructure, and then drinking water, and preparing for potential climate change was kind of last on the list in terms of these groups. Housing needs really support mixed-use development near activity centers and already developed areas, and so I think the town has done a great job of having that as a theme throughout. And so as you look at the activity areas and your commercial areas, there is support for adding density, adding mixed use, and really trying to make those more vibrant. Second is kind of preserving the character while increasing housing diversity and economic development. So balancing those two, encouraging more affordable housing for seniors and families, and then kind of going down the list using town-owned surplus lands for housing, and zoning, really looking at zoning for encouraging housing. The climate and environmental strategies really integrate environmental considerations into town purchasing and operations. So I think that goes to looking at future town projects. There's an opportunity to make them a little bit more climate resistant, and green, protecting open space and increasing tree planting, and then working on the infrastructure for what we see as more intense storms, and then drought and wildfire risk and things like that. Reducing waste, and then expanding access to renewable energy. I think this was the one where it was at the personal level, so encouraging homeowners to access renewable energy and electric vehicles and heating and cooling systems. And then actions that would most benefit Easton's economy, supporting the business development in the KeySit, Five Corners, and Industrial Park. It's really a strong theme, and I think that this group should not be surprised as we roll out the goals and objectives of the master plan. That's going to be sort of top on the list. Streamlining permitting and zoning to encourage investment. So that project that the town's working on, improving sidewalks and bike lanes, and looking at the Complete Streets program again, and updating the prioritization list, looking at the downtown and exploring transit and rideshare. And then the community focus initiatives are really kind of maintaining transparency and public engagement, supporting youth, seniors, and vulnerable populations with targeted services, preserving and reusing historical and cultural assets, expanding recreational amenities, and ensuring that the community is looking at resiliency and emergency preparedness, kind of the order of operations here. So I think with that, I'm going to stop for a moment and just ask if anybody has any questions, or if go ahead, Stephanie.
Thoughts, ideas, comments?
Yes, exactly. Yes, thank you.
Reaction?
Jeff,
Yeah.
with the proposed strategies, are these So is that the wording that you're kind of intending on using, or is that just a summary from the meeting? Because what I'm kind of wondering is how specific you think you'll be able to get in the action plan, as opposed to some of these very broad kind of strategies in this document here.
Yeah, that's a great question. Our task right now is to take sort of the three groups of like the information that we've gathered so far and to start to distill it more. So we would want to be having goals as the broadest topical area. And so, you know, what we saw from the town's previous master plan was there were so many goals and there were just so many things identified that it becomes overwhelming. So we want the goals to be kind of in these broad topics and simplified statements, and then we go into objectives and actions. And so that's the process that we're in now, of trying to figure out, make sure we have clarity on what's an objective and what's an action. And it goes in the order of goals. The most broad objective is detailed, but the actions are the most detailed thing that the town would pursue over the next several years. And so I don't know exactly how detailed we're going to be able to get, but that's our directive between now and the next time we talk, when we have a draft of all that. But it's a great question, because I think that's where we're at in our process. So I think what I'm going to do briefly is just share our timeline. Stephanie and Wayne and I met, maybe it was on July 11th, because that's the date of this draft. This is potentially subject to change and shift a little bit, but what we tried to look at was the sort of the end of the process is a presentation to the select board of the final master plan. And so we mapped it out where our target would be October. We have this meeting, maybe it's October 20th or thereabouts for the select board. And so what we typically do from here is work backwards through the timeline. And a really important part of that is a 30-day public review period. And so our kind of timeline starts with doing a lot. We have a lot to do. We have to come up with a second draft of that existing conditions document, which we shared with the committee a while ago, which has a lot of the data and statistics. And then we're going to have the middle section of the master plan is really trends, challenges, and opportunities. And we started to flesh some of that out with the presentation. And then we move into this kind of matrix and the implementation. So Joanne, what you were asking about is kind of the goals, objectives, and actions. Our target right now is to provide that to the committee for your next meeting. So I think we talked tentatively that would be August 20th. I don't know if that's set, but that's kind of our target, would be to deliver sort of the full draft to the committee on the 20th. And then depending on how that looks, we would be targeting sort of the ambitious rollout would be within a couple days of that. The town, through Stephanie and Wayne, publish the draft and promote the opportunity for public comments. And then kind of going along with that, it would be transmitted to the planning board and likely the select board as a draft. We had targeted a planning board meeting where they receive a copy of the draft master plan, and then probably doing a presentation to the planning board in the middle of September. The planning board is an important board because they are responsible for adopting the plan, and with their input, being on the 15th or so, then we close the 30-day public comment period on September 22nd. And so here's where we have a little bit of flexibility in the timeline. So if it takes a little bit more time in August to release the 30-day draft, we mapped out a potential meeting of this group to look at the public comments on either September 24th or October 8th. To receive comments, discuss them, and make sure that the committee feels like they should be incorporated, or if there's goals or objectives that need to change. And then a really important deadline if we were looking at the October 20th meeting of the select board is transmitting the final version. Their packet goes out a week prior, so we'd be looking at October 14th for that. So I think Stephanie and Wayne, because we spent a little time on this, kind of mapping this out, but it's ambitious, but it's also where we're at in the process to wrap it up and provide information to this group and then share the public comment period.
Jeff, if this committee's meeting on the 20th, are you going to share the draft with this group prior to the 20th? Or are you thinking just presenting it at that meeting?
No, we would like to transmit it at least, I think the date would, like the Friday prior, at least, to give the committee at least a couple days to look at it. That would be our actual target date. So I think, just in terms of quick questions for Stephanie and Wayne, I think any opportunity for us to understand whether the town-owned building reuse project has had any findings or will have any findings, that would be useful for us to understand. And then, oh, now it's escaping me. The other project, I mentioned it and now I can't remember.
Climate action plan?
The climate action plan, if there's been any progress with that. Yes, if we can start to just understand those timelines a little bit, and we don't have to do it right now, but we would like, if there's information available and we can incorporate it, we would like to try.
So they're doing a final meeting of the advisory groups this month. Let me just look at my calendar. Actually, it's next week, and I expect that they'll start. I believe they've started to kind of compile the plan, but we'll know more about that after that meeting.
And that's the climate action plan?
Yeah, on the climate action.
Great.
And that's on next Wednesday, the 6th.
Okay.
And Wayne, what is the schedule for the surplus
We'll
properties?
have some feedback for the consultant team after August 4th, and then they will spend a couple of weeks putting together their report on the 3 different properties and start working on the one that is most likely to be redeveloped soonest.
So would you think that sometime, so the draft, excuse me, the draft will be out for the 30-day public comment period through September. Do you think there would be any feedback before the end of September?
I would think so.
Okay.
So are there 2 kind of questions to that, Wayne? Because what you're talking about is one kind of where they're going to focus the preliminary design, right? Or is...
Yeah, that's the second question. Yeah, that's the second.
That's the second. The first, I think, is, and you can correct me, but is there input from that public input process that can be shared, and it would be relevant for the master plan?
Yes. So we are meeting with them again on August 12th. And from that, they should have some sort of they're terming it a presentation, but basically it's a summary of findings of potential reuses for all 3 sites. And I believe the site that they will move forward with doing a conceptual plan around that could support an RFP.
Yeah, I think that timeline will work well, whereas if that consultant group is presenting on August 12th, then we can at least understand what their preliminary findings are and just make sure that the master plan reflects that direction. And we talked about this early on, is that as this project shifted a little bit, I think we won't have, all these ongoing projects concluded by the time our draft is done, or, the master plan is done, but we can incorporate enough of the information so that someone who picks up the master plan will be like, oh, I'm really interested in these properties, the surplus properties, and there'll be at least enough narrative going that, that will be an action item. The action item in the master plan will be to continue to implement, the findings of the municipal reuse project. And that's where we're going to be at probably with the climate action plan as well. But at least there's enough overlap where we can incorporate that into the master plan as an action item, and that's desirable, and that's great that we're going to be able to do that. So appreciate that. So I think I don't have anything else necessarily, Stephanie, unless I'm missing something in terms of what you might be interested in, or if the committee has any questions.
I would ask the chairs and the board, is there something that they feel we haven't covered or questions?
A great summary, really helpful, pretty clear. Sounds like on the board side of things, our next meeting is when we're going to be able to discuss the draft. So I think our next was also clear. Anybody else have anything to add?
I think that was a great summary and of how the event went. A lot of work went into that, and I thought it was a good and productive event. I thought getting people in the room to discuss the priorities was productive and helpful, and I thought that it was timely, if not just too bad we couldn't have done it before the override discussion, because I thought a lot of people made a lot of good points, and I think a lot of people's eyes were opened a little in the discussions. But I think as far as what we've gone over today, great summary, all clear, looks good to me.
Great. And I mean, I didn't know, Stephanie, if August 20th is a set date, or if that's something that the committee would still discuss, or if it's potentially going to change. I didn't know how to handle that, but we did pencil that one in, and I have it currently as a hold on my calendar, but I don't know if that's something that the committee usually discusses their next meeting date at these meetings, or whether that happens offline.
So Wayne, we set this up for the entire group or no?
I believe we put
Yep,
these
we
out.
do. Yep.
So we've got Wednesday, August 20th, and then we had as a hold in that calendar that we sent out, I think Wednesday, September 17, but given this new calendar, we would not be doing the 17th of September. We'd probably be doing the 24th, or possibly, a little later than that. So I guess the questions for the group, since we have a quorum tonight, can our quorum tonight actually do the August 20th meeting?
I'm free.
I will not be available, but don't not do it because of me.
Okay.
Sahara? Good.
I'll be available.
Kat? Yeah. Tana?
Tana.
Tana, I'm sorry.
It's okay. It's all right. I'll be traveling then, but I'm going to be. I should be able to work that in. I'll have my computer with me. I should be able to join anyway.
Stephen?
At this point, I am available.
Okay. Nikki?
It's already on my calendar, and at this point should work.
Awesome. And Melissa?
I am available.
And Melissa, I did notice that you were here by phone and then came back kind of in person. So
Yes.
thank you for
I'm
being
sorry.
able to stick
Yeah.
with us.
Yeah, I think that
So
works
it
great.
seems
I
like
mean,
we should be able to. I'm sorry, Jeff. I'm thinking it looks like we should be able to have a quorum then for August 20th.
perfect. I think that's the more important date, to be honest. I think whether the group wants to, I think the September 24th, or on the calendar it was September 24th or October 8th, that can probably be determined later. But the 20th will be important so that we can convene. And I think the I think the request really is just for the committee to vote, sort of to release the draft for the 30-day public comment period. Obviously, we'll be transmitting a lot of information, but that's kind of the timeline that we're stuck with at this point, I think.
Okay, so it looks like if nobody has anything else, Stephanie, Wayne, you guys are good?
Yep.
Yep. All right. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
I second.
Okay. All in favor? Tana?
Aye. Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Nikki?
Yes.
Stephen?
Yes.
Melissa?
Yes.
Sahara?
Yes.
And Stephanie?
Yes, but my vote doesn't count, so.
Oh, okay. And Zygmunt, yes. All right. Good night, everyone.
Great.
Good night.
Thank you all very much.
Thanks. Stay
Thank
cool.
you.